Alright guys, welcome back to Wild Outdoor Living. So I'm going to give you guys my recap on the 2018 Crusher in the Tushar gravel race. I was able to finish, and it was quite the adventure, let me tell you. So we went down there, we stayed at the KOA. It was actually a great place for us to stay because we could basically stay there 2 nights for the price of 1 night in a hotel. I mean, we could get down there, stay the night before, after the race was over, didn't have to drive back up to Idaho, could just stay there. And we have a pretty nice camping setup, and the nice thing about the KOA was that, you know, they have bathroom facilities. It's a little bit more comfortable when you're taking on such a monumental task. It's kind of nice to not be roughing it so hard out in the woods. So that was a really good choice. There are other hotels that you can stay at, but we got down the day before, got the packet pickup. It was raining super hard that day already. I had to take towels and dry my bike back off. Everything was just completely soaked. I was a little bit worried about it, but luckily it worked out. Race morning, I was able to ride down to the start. You start on just this paved road, and that went pretty well for me. I kind of jumped around between groups, found a group that I was comfortable with, and stayed with them until the course really started to climb. And then I kind of stepped back into my own pace. And that first climb is really basically 25 miles long. It's an HC climb, you know, if you're familiar with climb ratings, and it's not that intimidating in terms that it gets steep, it mellows out, it kind of rolls back and forth, and so you get some breaks here and there, but it's a long climb. You climb like 4,000 feet in that first 25 miles, and it starts out on pavement, but when it hits the dirt, it starts to kick up even more. It can be a little bit rocky, and we experienced going up that it wasn't raining. It had rained and had kind of soaked in a bit, and the dirt was perfect. I was really happy at the time with the conditions, and they kind of couldn't be any better. I felt really good going to the top. Got to the cutoff time with plenty of time to spare, and then dropped down the Col de Crush. The Col de Crush is a pretty big descent. It's got some amazing views, and I just kind of took it easy. You don't have to go super slow. It's not a crazy techie descent, but there are some pretty dangerous corners in there, and they're very loose, and you're really not going to make up any time going down this thing. It takes a few minutes to get to the bottom, and you're going to spend hours climbing on the way back. So don't worry about rushing on the way down. You're not going to beat anybody. If you're pro, you're probably not even watching this video, but for us normal people, just take it easy, get to the bottom. And actually about halfway down, or 3/4 of the way down, it turned to pavement. I was stoked. It just let go and kind of, you know, hit 45 plus miles an hour, and was able to find a girl that wanted to pace line. Actually, she approached me and asked me if we wanted to take turns, and that ended up being awesome because there's always a headwind going between the 2 towns on the highway down there, and there was that day, and we were able to really make some good ground pretty efficiently by having a buddy. So that was awesome. I did skip the aid station down at the bottom of the Col de Crush. Shouldn't have done that because I ended up running out of water just for a few minutes in the Sarlacc Pit, but pretty easily could have not run out of water had I just stocked up then. But you're going downhill, you're feeling great, you're wanting to carry momentum, so I would recommend stopping there and filling up. But you get down, you go through the paved section, you end up back on the gravel, and this is where we jumped into the Sarlacc Pit, and I was feeling super slow. I couldn't figure out why this section was so difficult. It looks pretty flat and it's pretty open, but looking at the GPS, I realized we were actually doing like a 6% grade climb, so it made sense that we were going slow and it was hard. And so when I realized that, I was able to calm down and just kind of get through that. So that wasn't too hard, except that it was getting hot and kind of the vertical was stacking up on me. So got to the Col de Crush, thought I was going to do fine because I felt pretty good, but ended up cramping up super bad, and I had to walk a large portion of this climb. It's a really slow climb. A lot of people are doing, you know, 3, maybe 4 miles an hour at the most. Some people even less. I know there was one guy that I had been walking for quite a while, and this guy caught me going almost about the same speed, and he says, you know, I've been following you for a while. So I'm not going much faster. So eventually got to the top of the Col de Crush, cramping off and on, was able to get on my bike, off my bike, did a ton of walking, but eventually got to the top, got some ibuprofen and some Tylenol in me just to try to finish the race. That was able to relax my muscles quite a bit and allowed me to keep riding the rest of the way without having to walk again. But I was really tired at this point. But at that point, it just started raining super hard. I know some people experienced that rain on the Col de Crush. I experienced it right when I got to the very top. So got to the very top, I could see it was starting to rain, pulled out my rain jacket. At this point, it's just pouring, and continued on, and the rain quickly turned to just marble-sized hail almost. It was pretty painful. It became really cold, and it was just all I could do to just keep moving forward, getting through the mud and the hail that was actually stacking up on top. At one point, we were just riding through like an inch of hail on the road. It was a pretty intense experience. I saw a lot of people that, you know, were on the verge or definitely had hypothermia. It got a little bit scary there. You know, my fingers got cold. Talked to people for the next couple hours as we dealt with this hailstorm, you know, for the next 10 miles. And you keep climbing after the Col de Crush, so we weren't going very fast. And this is supposed to be the most scenic section on the route, but for me, it was definitely the most intense, but it was also pretty hard to see anything because of how much water was splashing up off the roadway and fog was rolling in. It was intense. It was doable because I had my waterproof rain jacket, but yeah, just tried to keep moving. Ended up you do a bunch of more gravel, and then the last climb is just a mile uphill. You know, I'd heard bad things about it. It ended up not being that bad compared to everything else I'd been through that day. And so I just kept in the granny gear, crawled my way to the top, and was thankfully, you know, my family was there and they were able to help me get warm. We got some food, got bundled up, and I was really grateful to have a ride back to town. So it was an amazing adventure. I'm super glad that I was able to complete it, and it's definitely something I would do again. Changes I would make though. So training recommendations, I came in with about 36,000 feet of climbing that year under my belt. Not enough. Enough to finish. I finished in about 7 hours and 45 minutes, but you really should probably come in with 90 or 100,000 feet of climbing legitimately done since January. And if you do that, I think you're going to be pretty solid. You should definitely get in the high mountains a few times. You know, you finish up there at the 10,000 feet. So if you're not used to the altitude, you definitely want to get up high, but do as much climbing as you can and keep track of it, because you might think you've done a lot of climbing, but this race requires a lot of vertical in order to be fit enough for it. So definitely keep track of it and try to hit that 100,000 foot mark if you can. But I think if you come in 50, 60, 70, you're going to be okay. I did it with under 40, but that was that I think I needed to do quite a bit more. Part of the problem was I had been sick before, and so part of my training had been cut into, but really do as much hill climbing as you can, for sure. So clothing recommendations, you can kind of wear whatever you'd like to. The speed of the race is not super high, so if you're a mountain biker and you want to wear baggies, I don't think it's going to be super detrimental to you. Had plenty of people pass me wearing baggies, and I was wearing Lycra in this particular race, but whatever's the most comfortable to you, wear that. And a big thing though that a lot of people don't bring, and that you definitely should bring, is a warming layer. So I had a waterproof jacket, and that was enough to do the job, but had I known it was going to be as bad as it was, and if I ever go, well, when I should say when I ever go in the future, definitely going to bring more. That waterproof shell, do not do the crusher without this thing, because the downpour that we experienced, it's happened before, it's going to happen again, and it can get pretty serious up there. This is a high mountain race at one point, and so you really want to definitely have at least one of these. But I would also recommend packing along some sort of core warming layer. So I won't do a race without this vest anymore, especially one that's that long. This is kind of a synthetic puffy vest. You could bring a jacket, but I think if you have a waterproof jacket and you have this, you're going to be pretty good to go. You of course want to keep your bike as light as possible, but if you end up in the situation that we did, you're not going to care if your bike weighed 10 pounds more. You're really going to want that protection. So the third thing I would recommend is an extra pair of gloves. I would recommend, you know, an insulated pair that's at least water resistant. So if you have those three things, you're probably going to be able to deal with anything that happens on that mountain. And if you don't, you know, it could actually get pretty serious. It could end your race. It could be even worse than that. So I definitely saw some people in dire straits that weren't as prepared as I was, and I needed to be even more prepared than I was going into that in terms of clothing. So forget about the few extra grams, bring those 3 items at minimum, and stay safe out there, really. So in terms of gearing, you can't have a low enough gear for this race. You need a slightly higher gears. I really recommend going with a double. If you're used to the one by, you've got a good setup in terms of range, that's great. But you definitely need to be able to do a decent amount of high speed when you're on the pavement. But above all, you need a super low climbing gear. I had a 2836 in the back. That worked pretty well for that bike. Other bikes, you know, like the Checkpoint, I don't feel needs to be geared quite as low. But if you can gear lower than that, go for it. I would have been so happy on the Cool to Crush if I had my stash and a 2846. I honestly would have loved it. You know, people talk about wanting your mountain bike on the way down the Cool to Crush. I really wanted it on the way up because it's so steep. Most of the race, that gearing was perfect. It was just that one section that I wanted even more. But yeah, don't worry about showing up with too much gearing because it's not possible. You can't have too much. So in terms of tires, I would definitely recommend erring on the bigger side. You know, this race has been done on mountain bikes and cross bikes. I had 45mm WTB Riddlers. They worked awesome. They were super consistent in the dirt there. They cornered really well and they rolled really fast, as well as giving enough cushion to roll over the terrain smoothly. They're not necessarily my favorite tire. If I was to go back, I would be on the Panaracer Gravel Kings. That's probably the most popular tire there. That's the one the race director really recommends. And having ridden it over 1,000 miles so far over the past couple months until we came into winter, you know, it's become my favorite gravel tire by far. Definitely, I think it's a tougher than a WTB tire, and it rolls just as fast, and I think the cornering is a little bit more consistent as well. So, but I would recommend erring on the higher side. You could get away with 35s, and lots of people have done that, but I don't think it's going to be any detriment to run a 45mm tire. I think it's just going to be a benefit to you. But go with what you're used to. If you're used to a mountain bike, run that. If you're used to a gravel or cross bike, go with that. If you're starting out new, I would say gravel bike is the best choice for this, or if you're used to both, gravel bike is definitely the best choice because there's a lot of pavement on the route, but either one is going to be fine as long as you're used to it and you know it's going to work for you. The only thing that's not going to work is if you show up with a bike that you haven't ridden before and aren't used to, or you show up with a bike that doesn't have enough gearing. The worst thing you could do is show up on your road bike with maybe 28s on and a standard gearing, you know, 11 to 28. It's just, unless you're pro, it's not going to fly, and even if you are, you're going to be really miserable with that setup. So run with what you want, but definitely come with enough gearing. In terms of bike choice, I had no complaints about the Trek 920. It's kind of a cross between a mountain bike and a gravel bike. It's in that touring bike status. I didn't really have any complaints. It was good on the road, it was good on the climbs, it was good on the descents. If I was to do it again, I would run my Trek Checkpoint, which I got after that. You know, I've raced it since then. I've compared the two bikes side by side. The Checkpoint actually does a little bit better off-road. It's got long chainstays, but the chainstays on the 920 are almost too long. It puts the tire so far behind you that it makes it a little bit more difficult to get grip, actually. And then the front end handling of the Checkpoint is just better overall. And so that's definitely the one I would go with. It's also just a faster bike in general. But overall, I didn't have any complaints with that style of bike. There's just better options. So you can get super nerdy on it and go back and forth on which bike you want. But ultimately, pick a bike you like, ride it a ton. And if you wear something out, make sure you've got a new one on there a week or two before, so you can ride it and make sure there's no defects in it before you end up on race day. So I didn't have any mechanical issues on the race day. Everything worked as planned. The only thing that didn't work super well is I have the bar end shifters on there, and in the hailstorm, all that sand started kicking up into the drivetrain and into the cables. And once you get to that granny gear, you can't push it a little bit farther like you can with other shifters, and so I couldn't help it into the gear. So occasionally those shifts were a little bit slow in those conditions. So just test it out in all sorts of conditions, make sure everything is gonna work. But really just know your equipment, I guess is what I'm saying, and you should be fine. So yeah, that was my experience with the 2018 Crusher and the Tusher. Those are my tips for you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'd be happy to answer any more specific questions. But yeah, if you guys have registered for the race, good luck. Do a ton of training, and most of all, have fun. This is a very difficult event, but it's also a very beautiful event, and it can be very enjoyable. So have a good time out there, and we'll catch you later.